Hello, my name is Mike Connolly, and I'm here today at the Portland Media Center representing the Maine Irish Heritage Center and their new series called Heart of Maine. And today is the third episode in that series, and we're very lucky, fortunate to have with us today John Kerry of Saco. So, John, I'd like to start off, if you would, with an easy question for you.
Yes.
What is there in your life that has made being Irish of great significance to you?
Well, I've always believed that our Irish Catholic family always identified ourselves as Irish and Catholic first, and then politically, Democrat used to be a big factor when I was younger. And I think it's important to note that our family prided ourselves in our Irish heritage, and our friends and extended family at the church and even in school, there were many Irish Catholic friends. But I think the most important thing was that I identified with the Irish culture, whether it was on radio, television, movies, The Quiet Man, Notre Dame, all of these, Holy Cross College, where many of or several of the key Irish people in our community went to school. Cheverus High School. We always took pride in anything that related to the Irish. My father came from Lynn, Massachusetts. That was his where he lived early in his life. And of course, the big Boston, broader Irish Catholic community, Southie and things of this nature, was very well known to us. So I always took a great pride in Ireland.
Now, when was the first time that anyone in your family was actually able to travel back to Ireland?
Well, I was the first one to go back to Ireland, and it was I went in the 1970s. And I was the first to go back. And I've been back maybe 10 or 15 times and since then. But we all cherish that as well. And visiting different groups, some family members, but more importantly, to be able to fulfill all those dreams and all those images of Ireland, all of which were exceeded with joy, with great joy. Yeah.
When you came back, I'm sure the family pestered you with question after question. What sort of things were they interested in, and what were the stories that you brought back with you?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing was that was Ireland as beautiful as it appeared, being the Emerald Isle? That was the first thing. How was it? And I used to describe it in my postcards and things. They asked about the people. I think the most important thing, I went on a kind of a mission. This was before we established the Kerryman pub in Saco. And so I used to go and visit all the pubs and take pictures and sketch the different pubs. So certainly my brothers, as much as anybody, they were very interested in the people, the architecture of the pubs, and the music and dance and the culture, because we had this image of what the Irish did, and we used to be in all the St. Patrick's concerts and things of this nature. So when I brought them back, and I met many people who I just loved, and so I think that was the thing, that Ireland was pretty much the way we envisioned it, and better and better.
I've heard many Irish people give reasons for being in a pub, but that was one of the most creative ones.
It's a good one.
Now, when you were over there, as many Irish Americans do, they look for roots.
Yes.
Were you able to find any family roots?
At first, no. I had a really difficult time. But as later, my sister Annie, who was a great genealogist in her own right, we were able to look for the Sullivans and the O'Rourkes and the Pendergasses in our family, and the Murrays, and we formed the McKennas. And so when we went over there, we had a relative in Connemara, and so it was the only person we were able to even remotely relate to who was able to relate about our family. It was my aunt's brother, and she left Ireland when she was a child. Back in the early 1900s, and the family had a farm, and so we were able to go to speak to him, and he gave, at least from the Sullivan O'Rourke side of the family, he was able to give us some background. Yeah.
Do you remember his name and what part
Willie,
of?
his name was Willie Coyne.
Willie Coyne.
From Connemara.
And
yeah.
did they spell it the way we do Coyne, or was it the Irish way?
It was the Irish way. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And what part of Connemara was that?
It's Connemara. It was. It was in the. Well, I want to say, I'm not sure exactly.
Was it near Spittle, or was it in the mountains?
No, in the mountains, more in the mountains.
Cornerona or Cornemona?
Cornemona, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
there was a Sister Malachi Joyce at the convent here
yeah.
in Portland for many years.
Yeah.
She was from Cornemona,
Yeah.
and also a longshoreman by the name of Jim Brown, also from Cornemona.
Yeah.
And when Ken Nilsson, the famous linguist from St. FX, was looking for people here in Portland, he specifically tried to find people from Cornemona.
Yeah.
And De Valera's grandson was from that area as well.
Yeah,
so you come from good roots, John.
Yeah, there you go.
And the name Kerry, where does that come from?
Well, actually, that was an anglicized. It was actually changed from the name. So it was named after the County Kerry. And that's where that came from.
And so Sullivans might have been from there, or some of the other.
The Sullivans and the O'Rourkes actually came from Ulster, and they were Catholics in Ulster. And then they went over from Ulster. They went over to Lancashire and Liverpool, England, worked in the mills, and then they left the mills and came to what was called the Castle Garden before Ellis Island.
Right.
They actually landed in New York. And then they went from there, they came to Biddeford, Maine.
Well, you've got most of Ireland covered then, from County Cork and Kerry all the way up to Connemara and Ulster as well.
Ulster, yes.
Yeah, well placed. Tell me a little bit about your family and growing up in Saco and Biddeford.
Well, our family, my father was the chief of police. He was a policeman all of his life. We had a very humble beginning. It was very much focused on faith, the family, education, and sports. And so we were brought up in a what I would call a traditional Irish Catholic family. And of course, in Biddeford and Saco, Saco is a great city, and Biddeford is as well. There was a lot of diversity there. We happened to be, we lived on the other side of the tracks, right on the river, right next to the river, not the high-class part of the river, but the other part. And all of my family in Ireland and in here in the States worked in the mills, or were policemen or firemen. My grandfather was the teamster for the fire department in Saco back in the 1900s, late 1800s and 1900s. My father was a policeman for almost 40 some odd years, and he was a chief of police for 25 years. But we had a very close-knit family, very loving family, hardworking, and we all did well in sports. And between religion, sports, music, we had a lot. We enjoyed music. And our mother was she was a saint. My father went to Mass and Communion every day. And we were guided by their moral and their integrity, their moral example and integrity. So that provided us the opportunity to grow and be nurtured with that love and good guidance, yeah.
In the early part of the 20th century, there was some tension between Saco and Biddeford.
Yes, yeah.
Could you explain a little bit about what you heard about that growing up?
Yeah, well, my father used to, he grew up in Biddeford, and there was an Irish community in Biddeford, an enclave. Of course, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there was a great influx of French Canadians who came to work in the mills as well. And he used to say he can remember most of the owners of the factories, Bates and if you will, Pepperell, they lived in Saco. Most of the workers lived in Biddeford, although a substantial number worked in Saco as well. But he can remember when he was a young lad, and my mother as well, there'd be crosses up on the hill, York Hill, going down from the bridge from Biddeford up over the hill, and Ku Klux Klan people actually parading there along the streets of Saco. And there was always a cultural tension between the French and the Irish, Biddeford French and then the Irish in Saco, and English as well. That persisted right through, I think, to the 60s and the 70s. I don't think it's as pervasive now, but it certainly pervaded in sports and in politics and other things. Yeah.
Great rivalries with St. Louis High School in Biddeford and then Thornton Academy.
Tremendous rivalries, and it was very palpable. And yet, just the other day, I had a luncheon with one of the captains of one of the football team back in the 60s. He went to St. Louis. I was blessed. I left Thornton Academy as a sophomore, went to Cheverus, and I actually graduated from Cheverus. The beauty of it was that I met many people from Portland, and I became much closer to the people in Biddeford and Saco, especially from St. Louis and Thornton Academy. That was a blessing in many ways, a great blessing.
Now, I understand from speaking with you earlier that one of the families that you were close to were the Brandts.
Oh, yes, very
and
close,
I
yeah.
haven't told you my connection, but
please
Max Brandt was the director of the Semester at Sea program when he was at University of Pittsburgh for many years. And he hired me in 2004, and I was fortunate to go back 4 times altogether around the world.
Wow.
And 2 times with Max.
Yeah.
So tell me about your connection to the Brandt family.
Well, it started in the 1st grade. I went to school, and Tina Brandt, Christina, was my seatmate, actually, at one point. But I went to school with Tina all the way up through to high school. And then her older sister, Margaret, went to school with one of my brothers. And Max went to school with another one of my brothers. And then there was Barbie, who was younger. She worked at our Kerryman pub for 25 years. But more importantly, whenever my father would see Mrs. Brandt on the street, he would call her by her first name. And she had I'm not exactly certain what her first name was, but he'd call her by her first name, he'd hug her and give her a kiss. And they had known each other since they were teenagers. And her husband and my father and mother were very close friends. So the Brandt family, we went skating on the Brandt Pond, had cookouts and stuff like that. And but the most important thing, we just loved all of them, Max, Bobby, Tina, Molly, all of them. They were all just wonderful. Yeah.
Very special family.
Very special family.
And typical of many Irish families, they carry a name that's identifiably not Irish, like Brandt is German.
German, yes.
But a very strong Irish connection.
Very. Yeah.
In fact, Max's grandmother lived right in the parish of St. Dominic's. So now you had mentioned Thornton Academy and then Cheverus.
Sure.
And then you went on from there to Holy Cross.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about your education from that point on.
Okay. Well, when I went to Cheverus, I distinctively wanted to go to either Notre Dame or Holy Cross or BC. It was my goal to play sports primarily. It wasn't so much academically oriented as such at the time, but it was geared to the Catholic community, the Catholic identity. I wanted to go to a Catholic school. And after going to Cheverus, I applied to like Fordham and Holy Cross and BC, and I was blessed to get accepted at all of the schools in Providence. And I went to Holy Cross, where I played baseball, and I enjoyed the community of the Holy Cross. I found that there were many, many Irish and Italian and Polish Catholics at Holy Cross at the time. And at that time, back in the 60s, most of the teachers were Jesuit priests. And it was a great community that I have held these friendships and relationships all these years. And while I was there, I was advised to go to Boston College to become a social worker and a community planner. And so I went on from there, went to BC, and then I went on from there and went to Harvard to get a public policy degree that would prepare me for public life. I wanted to do something in public service. I wasn't exactly sure but it was to be dealing with helping people. But the Holy Cross community, the Jesuits there, not only at Holy Cross but at Cheverus and at BC, were very instrumental in shaping my future.
You've seen great changes in the Catholic Church in your years.
Yes, I have.
Your assessment of the previous Pope, perhaps Francis, and now the first American Pope,
Yes.
and interestingly took the name of Leo XIV after a very consequential Pope, Leo XIII.
Correct.
Tell us a little about that, your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I think I had actually several audiences with Pope John Paul II. And when I was in New York working for the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, I was able to meet John Paul II. And of course, then I read everything that he wrote. He was just a great writer, and he was I think, a pillar of the Catholic Church and set the tone for 500 years of Catholic theology and Catholic, if you will, vision and direction. And then of course, with Pope Francis, and I won't say anything about the other Pope, but he was a wonderful man as well, but wasn't there in my estimation long enough to make a significant contribution. He did as the head of the Curia, but Pope Francis was very instrumental in the Jesuit philosophy, spreading the word of the needs of the poor throughout the world. I think that was very significant. And secondly, I think that the Jesuit community had a major impact on the academic and the, if you will, the philosophical development after John Paul II and with Francis. Now, Pope Leo XIV, his first words were peace, communion, unity. I think it's very significant that he's looking for justice coming from a diversity of the Catholic Church throughout the world to be more unified. Pope Francis was an initiator, and he initiated along the lines of diversity in the Church. He brought more diverse cardinals into the College of Cardinals, and then they selected an American who had Peruvian, if you will, influence, and if you will, they selected a man who could bridge both the Francis philosophy and, if you will, a more unified and traditional church. And I think Pope Leo XIV really is going to enrich Pope Leo XIII's social justice agenda. Most people don't realize how rich the Catholic Church is in social justice. The 1800s, where my family were living in poverty in Ireland, and then having to leave Ireland in the famine. Well, that's when Pope Leo began to address the Industrial Revolution and the needs of the poor and the people and human dignity and all of these concepts that the Catholic Church brought to the broad worldwide community, enriched the community, the worldwide community. I think Pope John Paul II, I think Pope Francis is very well received by the progressive. John Paul II, more traditional. I really believe Pope Leo XIV is going to bridge that gap.
And Rerum Novarum was Leo's big contribution, and the fact that he chose that name to follow is a real indication of the direction that he might be going in.
Absolutely, yeah. And Rerum Novarum, of course, set the foundation for the Catholic social teaching, the condition of the workers,
And you found most of your work in Catholic social work,
that's correct.
Very important to you. I'm going to take a big jump, okay? So I'm going to go from the Catholic Church to the Irish Mafia.
Okay, all right, okay. That's good. That's quite a leap.
Now, you know what I'm talking about, but the audience perhaps doesn't.
Yes.
Could you tell me who was the Irish Mafia and how in the world did you ever get involved with that group?
Well, really, Joe Brennan is really, he didn't do it. I think we did it, the people around him. But I would say Joe Brennan, we were all dear friends of Joe Brennan. He was like a brother to us, politically and family-wise, and Irish Catholic culturally wise. But Jerry Conley Sr., Jerry Conley Jr., Eddie Kelleher, Jackie Cashman, Charles Mylan up in Bangor as well. My brother David Kerry was very much a part of it. The reality was at that time, legislatively and culturally, they were, we had in Maine a kind of a culture that was in 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, it was really a more conservative Republican-oriented entity. And then with Ed Muskie, there started to be a shift, and all of a sudden, the Irish Catholics review started to have an impact outside of Portland, in Bangor, the major cities, and Waterville too. Of course, our friend George Mitchell,
Right.
Wonderful man. But I think what happened was with Joe Brennan, Ed Muskie, Joe Brennan, Ken Curtis, George Mitchell, 4 pillars of the community, not just people who were Democrats. The Irish Mafia, we came together, we supported Joe Brennan, first of all, as a friend and as a political figure. But then we all went to Ireland. We went to Ireland with him. We went to Ireland with Johnny Baldacci, of course. He became indirectly a part of the Irish Mafia.
Honorary Irishman.
Honorary Irishman. And Severin Beliveau. You'd have to put Severin Beliveau in there as well.
Well, he has good Irish roots too on his mother's.
Well, he always talked about his McCarthy roots, I think. I think he said McCarthy, I'm not sure.
Yes.
Yeah, he did. And, we stuck together. And Davy Redmond, oh my God, I can't forget Davy Redmond. It was a wonderful family of relationships, and public policy was impacted by it. People like we did put forth policies, whether it was in economics or education or human services. We tried to promote human dignity that came from Rerum Novarum and from our Catholic social teachings. People don't realize how bright Joe Brennan was and how good Joe Brennan was.
He always gave credit to the people around him, which is a mark of a great leader, I think.
Wonderful man. I worked for him, not only I was a senator and a state representative, but I worked for him as a legislative liaison. And I always said with great pride, I was a dear friend of Joe's, and of he and his family, all the Brennans. He never lied. He never twisted things and distorted reality in any way. He was the most honest politician I ever worked with, because he had such great responsibility, and he had great character and integrity. So being part of that little mafia was a source of pride for certainly me and my brother. And Kelleher was a rascal. He was a rascal, though. Eddie Kelleher, he was a rascal. And Cashman, he's a rascal, too. Nothing wrong with Cashman. I had a brother like Dickie, was like Jackie Cashman.
Did they bring you into the group to keep them on the straight and narrow?
Probably they probably thought I was too conservative for them, too mild-mannered, I think, yeah.
To go back to Joe Brennan for just a minute, he took chances too politically.
Oh, yes, he did.
He was one of the first politicians to openly support Barack Obama.
Yes.
And also in keeping the Maine National Guard from going down to Central America. Controversial at the time.
It was. And the other thing was he was the first governor to support Ted Kennedy when Ted Kennedy ran against Jimmy Carter. And that was very significant as well.
Yes.
Joe Brennan was a great man. Joe Brennan, and the other thing is, I'm glad you brought that out about the positions that he took. Joe Brennan appointed George Mitchell to be U.S. Senator. He could have appointed himself. He could have picked one of the Irish Mafia, which everybody thought he was going to do. And he picked George, and I remember sitting with him, and he came up, and I remember him telling me, he said, Johnny, a lot of people are going to be upset at this decision. He says, but I think he's the right man for the job. And I said, great courage, great courage. And people were upset, some people, and look how great George Mitchell turned out to be.
Wow. The test of time.
Test of time.
The test of
time. Great
time.
man, wonderful man.
Now, without getting this program censored, are there any stories you can tell us about the Irish Mafia hitting Connemara and Spittle?
Well, we did. The interesting thing about it is that we were together as friends and family, really, all of us. And we'd go there, and there were several of us that went to Mass and Communion every day, by the way, when we were there, no matter where we were. And we were mostly in Dingle. We'd start off at Shannon Airport and go to New Fergus, I think it's called Fergus. And we'd go from there, and then we'd go to Spittle, or we'd go down to Dingle as such. But we'd go to Mass and Communion every day. Then we'd go to the pubs. We'd be at the pubs. Never failed to make the pubs every night. And then we'd take day trips and go all over. But we would have great times. We'd have good fun with everybody, have music, and people like Jackie Cashman and I think a couple of other, Pat McGowan, they could sing really well. Oh. And Kevin Conley, Kevin, Jerry's younger brother, he could sing really well. So we'd get with people in different places. There'd be a lot of song, a lot of dance, a lot of deep philosophical discussions, and a lot of politics in our discussions. And we met a lot of dignitaries of Ireland as well. Yeah, no. But we weren't as rascally over there. There weren't any big bar fights or anything like that. That didn't happen to us there.
I heard that you were put up by the Curran family in Spittle.
Yes.
And directly across the Little Boreen, the road from them, were the two relatives of John Ford.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yes. I stayed there once. I'm not sure if they were the ones, but there was the Curran family's, her B&B was full. So I had to go over and I had to stay.
The Feeneys.
The Feeneys. And I stayed there. And believe it or not, there was one of their relatives worked at Nissen's Bakery. I used to work there summers. And one of the Feeney nieces or cousins worked at Nissen's, and she lived in that town of Spittle as well.
The first time I ever stayed there with the Feeneys, I was looking for the birthplace of John Ford's mother. They always said it was the Aran Islands, but I had a suspicion that it was on the mainland. And when I went into the house, Mrs. Feeney, I asked her if she could take me. She said, "That's not my side of the family, that's my husband." Very, very nice people.
Yeah, wonderful.
John, so much of your work were with the Catholic bishops, both here in Maine and also in New York. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you were active with that I think a lot of the audience maybe don't know about or maybe have forgotten about were the McBride principles. Yes. Could you describe your work on behalf of those?
Yes. When I was in the legislature as a senator, I studied Sean McBride's principles, of which were instituted when he won the Nobel Prize in South Africa. And so I fashioned the legislation based on his principles that were passed in South Africa. And I actually went with my brother David to Ireland as a sponsor of that bill, and met with Jerry Adams, met with Martin McGuinness, met with many of the Irish the people were considered to be in the Irish Republican Army and Sinn Féin. And then I also went with the Protestants who had a different view of the McBride principles. And I was scheduled to go to meet with Sean McBride himself, who lived in Dublin. And I and a couple of other people went to the hotel he was at. And he was in a hotel at that time, but he had pneumonia, and I couldn't get to meet him. And believe it or not, he passed away within 10 days. That was a sad moment. But the principles were meant to, when the pension fund of the state of Maine invests in pensions in different investments, they have criteria for investment. And I wanted to add two, as did many others, to those principles that they not discriminate on the basis of religion, this and that. And therefore, Ireland still had discrimination, North and South. So when I visited the Irish Republic, you could go to certain cities in the southern part where 85% were Catholics and 15% were Protestants. And then you'd go to north and you'd go to Derry and other places. or in Belfast, 85% were Protestant, 15% were Catholics. So when I spoke to Jerry Adams and the different people about the McBride principles, he said, well, you know, he didn't get all excited about it. He was not supposed to be the head of the Irish Republican Army, but most people believed he was. He and Martin McGuinness said, well, you know, they called me Senator Kerry, well, we'll certainly educate you to what the circumstances are here in the northern part of Ireland. They said, you certainly will be opposed by the British government, in which they were.
Yes.
And the British ambassador from Boston, the consulate from Boston, came to the hearing in Augusta, and
yes.
spoke against it. Yeah, and they defeated the governor. It passed. The legislation passed the year I introduced it, and the governor vetoed it. And there was at that time the Republican majority could stop anything 2/3
Yes.
vote for passage, and so that happened. So it defeated Jack Cashman. The following 2 years later, reintroduced the legislation, and it passed.
And it
which was
passed.
good. Yeah,
It was signed.
So the McBride principles are, in fact, enshrined in state of Maine law. Yeah.
And it was similar to other principles related to South Africa.
Correct.
And so to be consistent,
Apartheid.
I think people needed to see those things as part and parcel.
Very much so. Apartheid. It was very much, and Sean McBride, an Irishman. Think of it. You
Yes.
know, doing this in Africa, South Africa.
You and I have
Extraordinary.
something in common. When I was at UCD in Dublin,
Okay.
Sean McBride was living in Clonskee, the back gate, and several times I almost walked from class to go to his house and never quite accomplished that. So we both missed a great opportunity
It was,
there.
I can see myself sitting in the lobby of that hotel waiting to go see him. Then they said, "Oh, we'll let him." The doctor's with him now. They're going to advise him, and they said no. And he certainly passed away. Yeah.
I want to throw another name in your direction, John O'Leary.
Okay, John. Yes, great guy.
Tell us a little bit about John, because I understand that he was working behind the scenes for peace in Northern Ireland as well.
John O'Leary was a great, brilliant person, first of all, great student, great lawyer. He worked with, of course, Ralph Lancaster at the law firm, and wonderful man. And John had been very close. In fact, John and I, and Shannon Eaton, another person, a very close friend of John's, we met with Jerry Adams, who came here. John O'Leary was a person that engaged in the legalities of these issues, and also promoted socioeconomic justice in everything that he did. As mayor of Portland, as a councilman, and things of this nature. Johnny was a wonderful human being and a brilliant strategist as such. We were, of course, competitors for the first congressional district at one point, but we were never adversaries. We were friends before and after. I happened to become the nominee at that time. And ended up running against Jock McKernan. But Johnny and his family and his wife, she was a wonderful person as well.
And they both died way too early.
Way too early. Incredibly young.
Yes.
Incredibly young.
And he was given the consulship of Chile.
Yeah, he went to Chile. Yeah. He was, and he was very, very. He was very close to, I think, Bill Clinton. I think that's what it was, yeah.
I was teaching at USM at the time, Irish history, and John was scheduled to come and talk to my class about Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And he called me and he said, I'm going to have to beg off, and I have to tell you this in confidence. I'm going to be nominated to be the ambassador to Chile, but we need to keep that quiet until it happens. But he's just a wonderful person and great guy from Munjoy Hill as well.
Oh, very, very much so. Very Cheverus grad. Yeah.
You're just like Joe Brennan and getting that in every time you can. I don't know how we've gone this far without talking about the Kerryman's Pub.
Oh, yeah, right.
But talk to us a little bit about your family connection to that.
Yeah, well, my brothers and I, we started that with our cousin Jimmy Sullivan. And the Kerryman Pub was a work of labor of love. It was really, we had talked about owning an Irish pub for many, many years when we were in college and things at high school, college, and graduate school, and there a little thereafter. But I was in the real estate business, and I actually had the building for sale, the Kerryman Pub, the original building. Who, by the way, Dolly Brandt's husband, Ray, lived in that house. So there's another connection to the Brandts. That was through their in-laws, her husband, Ray. And make a very long story short, when I was going to be selling the property, and my brother Richard came up to me and said, well, why don't we buy it and start a restaurant and pub? And I said, well, that sounds like a great idea. I said, I'll put it together, renovate it, build it, do whatever has to be done, and I'll go to Ireland and figure out how to design it. And that's how the labor of love, me going to Ireland, visiting all the pubs. Someone had to do it. So I went there and spent several weeks in Ireland, sketched all the different Irish pubs out, and then incorporated that in the architecture. We tore down 2 barns. It became a very rustic, very unique, 200-year-old barn board. And then we had Schooner Fair start us off, and Schooner Fair played at the Kerryman Pub every week, 3 days and sometimes 4 days a week for years. They were in the super connection to Cheverus, Munjoy Hill, and we had Portland, many people from Portland go to the Kerryman Pub. But the Kerryman Pub was a family, once again, 30 employees, Irish music. We had started the Clatter, and actually the Clatter is now held by the Maine Irish Heritage Club. Mary McElhinney called me one day after we were closing the pub, and she said, Johnny, do you mind if we reinstitute the Clatter at the Maine Irish? So that was done. We used to have many Irish bands and individual entertainers and singers who would come over, go to New York first, go to Boston, then come to Maine and play at the pub.
One thing I remember, John, was that you opened up the pub for the Maine Irish Children's Program.
Yes, we did.
The group that brought over kids from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, we did that many years.
And it was a great fundraiser for them, which they needed to do.
No, we did that, yeah.
Now, sticking on Northern Ireland just a little bit further, you mentioned Jerry Adams.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know that the very first place that Jerry Adams was able to come to in America to raise money for Sinn Féin, after he helped to turn Sinn Féin away from the violence and toward politics, was Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Shannon Eaton before. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, when we went to Ireland, when I was during the McBride Principles, that part of that I spent with Shannon. Shannon came over, and we visited different relationships with Jerry Adams. Were very controversial. These are very obviously. My driver wore a flak jacket. The young driver, that Adams, it was his person, that he drove me all over Northern Ireland. And in Derry, me, my brother David, and Shannon were entertained by John Hume, who was a Nobel laureate as well, along
David Trimble.
With David Tremblay from England. And of course, Adams no one believed that he was as pacifistic as he was. And I can't say that I would do either. But John Hume, being he did not believe in violence. And my McBride Principles were nonviolent. And I told that to Adams and to the Martin McGuinness and others, and all the people that I met. But the reality was Shannon Eaton, she also had a connection through another gentleman connected to Jerry Adams. And there was a guy named Michael McBride, and he was killed by the British SAS group. He was assassinated. He was definitely a member of the Irish Republican Army. And Shannon brought us to that home the home of the mother of Michael McBride, who had been killed by the SAS. And when we left there, there were people asking us to raise money for the Irish Republican Army at the time. And my personal view was that that might be a role appropriate for some people, not for me. Mine was based on my Catholic faith, and I believe that even though I supported much of what the IRA stood for, and certainly Sinn Féin, not so much IRA, but that there should be peace. There had to be peace at some point. And of course, 10 years later, Clinton appointed George Mitchell. It actually was 15 years later. I was told by John Hume at the time when I went to visit Derry, this was in the early 80s, that I was the highest ranking public official ever to visit Derry. I was stunned. I mean, I was only a state senator. And I said, what about Ted Kennedy? And they said, oh God, no. He said, they wouldn't touch it. But I think the principles that we live by, the Joe Brennans, the John Kerrys, if you will, I put myself in Joe's because of our Irish Catholic background. We believed in peace and justice, and we lived up to those standards taught to us by the Jesuits and others, and our mothers and fathers and things. Another person I would say connected to that team was Bob Dunphy.
Yes.
Bob Dunphy Sr. And Junior followed him after. But Bob Dunphy was very much a part of, if you will, the Irish Mafia. But he was in the background, a very instrumental man, a great man, connected all over, had connections all over the world.
The Eastland Hotel, the Parker House,
yes.
Aer Lingus Airlines.
Aer Lingus. And in fact, I told a story just the other day when I was flying over to meet Sean McBride, and when I went to Belfast, after meeting with Sean, I stayed at Bob Dunphy's place at Ballyferriter. He had a cottage on the...
In Dingle.
In Dingle. It was beautiful, beautiful. But I remember as we were flying over, an airline attendant came up to me and tapped me and said, Mr. Kerry, you have been asked to come up to first class. Come up here and go up to first class. Evidently, Bob Dunphy called the airlines and Aer Lingus and said, there's a guy on, his name is John Kerry, he's with his brother David, move him up. And so they moved me up. So we went up there, we went up to first class, and we said, oh, this is grand. And so we're there, and then 10 minutes later, I got a note from the airline attendant again, and I read it, and it says, John, I have changed your hotel reservations at the Europa Hotel, which had been bombed 27 times. Most
in all of Europe.
We've moved you to the Culloden, which was in the Protestant section of Belfast. And he changed our hotel. He thought it was too dangerous that we stayed at the Europa. But we did that, and that's when I went and I met Jerry Adams and at Falls Road, and it was a wonderful experience, actually. Yeah.
At that time, John, when Jerry Adams came here, it was very much a dry run because they didn't want to start in a big city like Boston or New York. They didn't know what the reception would be. They didn't know if the British would take an active role. And it went very well, as you remember here in Portland. Yeah. Big crowd, a great speech at the Holiday Inn downtown. And the picture that appeared in the paper the next day was a very close friend, Claire Foley, who was from East Galway. And she was an older woman at that time, but a picture of her in the paper together with Jerry Adams. Now, Claire received many telephone calls. What are you doing with that, revolutionary, the rebel? And she said, anybody that works for peace, I'll support.
There you go.
So, and it turned out that he was working in that direction. And look what happened, as you said, 15 years later.
Well, the thing is that when I met with him, he was charming, very intelligent. He and Martin McGuinness, Martin was his Secretary of State, and at the time. And I said, Jerry, I says, you got a dangerous job. And he says, well, much like Yasser Arafat, I never sleep in the same bed more than one night at a time. Never. I don't stay with my family. I have to travel at all times. So peace comes at a great price, and some people have to pay that price.
Today, John, it seems like just being a politician, you have to pay that price.
That's correct. That's correct. Our world is going to turn around, though. I have great faith and great belief that there's going to be a shift. There's going to be a spiritual shift. I actually, when I left politics and went to work for the cardinal and the bishops, I believe that politics can go just so far of solving human problems, but only religion and faith and spirituality can attest to the needs of one's dignity, essential dignity as a human being. The Catholic Church, and many other churches, I'm not going to say it's just us, but the Catholic Church has the principles to address from womb to tomb the dignity of the human person. And that's what I think is going to change. Something's going to happen, and people are going to have to change the degree of negativity, of the lack of civility in public life. I think we have the answer, and it's love, it's peace, it's communion, it's justice, it's diversity and unity. And someone's going to be able to convey that message soon. I hope it doesn't take a world war, such as what's happening potentially with Israel and Iran. But I really believe that's going to happen.
You brought us right into the next area. I wanted to talk about your work with the Catholic bishops in Haiti.
Yes.
One of the most dangerous places in the world these days.
Yes, yes. Haiti is a wonderful country, if you will. It's from the point of view of the people. They're wonderful people. I thought once I had been to Harlem, I'd been to East New York, I've been to Jerusalem, I've been in a lot of places. There were some of which were very dangerous and very poor. Nothing like Haiti. I was completely captivated by Haiti. And I think God sometimes guides us to certain prayers. I've been involved with a school for over 10 years down there. When I go there, I have to have armed guards. That's the fact of life now. Can't go to the school anymore as of last July because of the gangs. One of my friends was assassinated who ran for president, and then they assassinated Moïse Jovenel, the former president. But the church in Haiti, in fact, I am working with another good friend of mine from Maine, I'm just not trying to think. Well, with people working with the United Nations and the Catholic Church.
Rick Barton.
Rick Barton, that's exactly it. Rick, who's at Princeton. And Rick is trying to put together a team of people to help unite a group of people in Haiti. And I've been an unofficial advisor to the present Haitian Presidential Council. They have 7 members of the council, of which, unfortunately, 2 have been accused of bribery and things of that nature. Unfortunately, many of the politicians in the Senate in Haiti are very crooked, and partly connected to the gangs. But what Rick and I are trying to do is bring together the bishops, the vice president of the Catholic Bishops Conference, who was a good friend of mine, Bishop Duma, and have him request that the Archbishop of Miami convene a group of international individuals then to appeal to the United States, to Kenya, to Dominican Republic, people in Haiti, and France, and possibly Canada. Bring them together to devise a development plan for the rejuvenation of Haiti and get it peacefully done. But it's going to require the United States to maybe put troops in there, or someone else. That I was told by someone who is really knowledgeable that it's going to take a brigade of like special forces units to go into Haiti and to quell the gangs at all around Port-au-Prince.
They say that a failed state is even more dangerous than a terrorist organization.
That's exactly, and that's where they're going. And unfortunately, I used to drive all over Haiti from one end to the other, and never had a problem. We were stopped by gangs, and they extracted money and things like that. But they didn't kidnap me, which could happen definitely today. Or, that would definitely happen today. They make their money on that. They sustain themselves. But the United States has to, and I've conveyed this to Senator Collins, to Senator King, and to Shelley Pingree and others, they cannot ignore Haiti. Haiti's only an hour off the coast of Florida. It's crazy. China is going to move in there. I see the influence of China in Haiti. I see the influence of Asian countries in Haiti. And it will mean nothing but sadness for Haitians, who are wonderful people, but they have corrupt government, and the United States cannot ignore it. I don't know why we have not acted sooner, to be very candid. I hope Rick and I can do something there.
There's a group of medical practitioners from Maine in Cape Hessian in the northern part. Are you familiar with that group?
Yes, and Rick has actually been in contact with not only the Physicians Beyond Borders, but a group that are still operating in Haiti, and they will be a part of, hopefully, this group that is going to try to devise an economic development and peace security plan for Haiti.
John, as you look back over your life, and your resume is most incredible, and haven't even gotten into the things that you're working on. Perhaps you'd like to talk a little bit about your work in energy and and what you're doing today. But if you could rate that together with some of the other things that you've accomplished in your life, what do you think about your accomplishments looking back?
Well, the first thing is that I pursued my dreams. They were humble dreams, but I pursued them. I always wanted to play baseball in Fenway Park. I played baseball in Fenway Park for Holy Cross. I always wanted to play basketball in the Boston Gardens, play for the Celtics. I played basketball at Cheverus High School in the Boston Gardens. I wanted to also play football wherever the Patriots were before the New England. I never got that one. That one never happened. But then I also wanted to serve people. I was brought up by a very humble father and mother who just had served people. And so I spent most of my life being guided by people like Mr. Curran at Cheverus High School, my coach, Mr. Notice at Cheverus High School, coach, on to Holy Cross, where the priest at Holy Cross guy, Father Dunn, Father LeBrand, the different people guided me there. Then on to Father John Driscoll at graduate school at Boston College. Actually sent me to graduate school at Harvard, and then I went on to live in Harlem to work with people there, and then I realized what the world was like. And then serendipitously, I ended up working for John Cardinal O'Connor, the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, and that was a great gift to me. I had been visiting, I had gone to Israel and to Jerusalem, and I visited the Catholic entities there, and I went to all the refugee camps, the Palestinian camps. And after I came back to New York, the Cardinal Archbishop, I was going to go to work in New York for one of the Catholic Near East, which is a mission of the Catholic Church in New York. And Cardinal O'Connor asked me to come to work for him, which was unbelievable. So I worked for him for 10 years, and Cardinal Egan, and all the Catholic bishops of New York State. And I feel that somehow there's been this hand guiding me to these different places, whether it's Ireland, Haiti. It's all been very meaningful to me. So the other parts of politics, whether it's energy or other things, they were secondary.
Is there something about your optimism that comes from your Irishness, or that comes from your humble beginnings?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think I was, I really do have a positive outlook on life. I married an Italian, Irish person from Munjoy Hill, Linda Tuttle. We have 4 children, and I always tell them, live your dreams. do good things, serve people. I've always been very happy. Didn't take much to make me happy. I've been lucky. I've been blessed. Didn't take big cars, big houses, things that never interested me.
You said you got to play at Fenway Park. You got to play at Boston Garden,
Yeah.
and probably you wanted to be born on Munjoy Hill.
Yeah,
like you
right.
did the next,
After
next
I learned
best
about
thing.
Munjoy Hill, absolutely, yeah.
You probably know the story of you mentioned the Claddagh Awards
Yeah.
coming originally from the Kerrymans,
Yeah.
and the first recipient in Maine Irish Heritage was Joe.
Oh, yeah,
of
right.
course.
Yeah.
So everybody knew who the second recipient had to be. Somebody from the West End.
Yeah.
Had to be Jerry Connolly, and the two of them were best friends all the way through
Oh, yeah.
life.
They're wonderful, wonderful
And
people.
you know, when he passed just recently, the eulogy that was given by George Mitchell was something to
Yes,
behold
yes,
at the
yeah.
cathedral.
Yes, yeah.
So we're almost out
Yes.
of time, John, but briefly, your main concerns going forward?
My main concerns are that people, there needs to be more unity in the world, more civility, more love, from families to international relations. And I happen to believe that that comes through prayer and contemplation and the Holy Spirit. Other people may think it differently, but I think that's what motivates and moves people. And I think there will be leaders who will step up to the plate and will follow those principles that are going to enhance the human dignity of people, not only here in the United States, but throughout the world. Yeah, I really believe that.
And those are all valid points, very valid. And so I'd like to balance them then with your reasons for optimism.
Well, my reasons for optimism is that I believe that people are basically good, and I believe love will overcome evil and violence. Someday, some way, people are going to experience something so atrocious and so violent that they're going to have a change of heart. That hasn't happened yet. They're still on antipodes, still fighting progressives and conservatives. It's got to stop. But I believe it's going to happen.
John, your interview today follows two previous ones with Kevin Kincannon and Margaret Craven.
Yeah.
Two wonderful people of Irish background
Absolutely.
who've spent their whole life doing things similar to what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to thank you for the interview today, but also thank you for all the work that you've done. And I think as people look at this interview, they'll marvel at all of the different aspects of service that you performed during your lifetime. And so on behalf of the Irish community, but also the wider community of the state of Maine, I'd just like to say, again, a great big thank you to you. And I hope you have many more years of service.
I hope so too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Michael.
this is Mike Connolly signing off, and look forward to the next In the Hearts of Maine interviews. Thanks again, John.
Thank you.